All right. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to today's live session on YouTube. And happy to have you here today. Thank you very much for joining us here today. Today is going to be another very interesting conversation. Yes, today will be a very interesting conversation. So, if you have anybody you know that's supposed to be here, and the person is not here yet, please go and remind them to come and join us here, right? Today we'll be talking about village mansions and financial trauma, right? What are we really trying to heal? So today is going to be a new reality. We're going to be bringing out a new reality to all of us. This is one class that all of us should be a part of. Um, because we're going to be talking about a lot of things. This thing about um, the way that trauma has come to shape the way we go about, especially property investing, and a lot of us actually do not know. And I want to expose the origin of that trauma today. All right. So thank you. I see in the building we already have Mrs. Anne, our cohort two leader. We have Madam Banke Adesuji. We have Madam Tony George also joining us on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us. Get people to come on board. Send them messages if possible. Put it on your WhatsApp status if you can. Just get people to be here. Yes, Madam Blessing the Belle. Happy to have you here again. Yes. Oh, I see Madam Mobola Tomori. Welcome, welcome, and welcome. All right. So, as usual, we're going to be keeping it very real. And we are going to be having a very interesting conversation, right? Madam Fumi Adewola, it's been a long time, but happy to have you here again today. It's glad for you to know that Madam Fumi and I, Madam Fumi has a child that has same birthday as Mona. Yes. So thank you very much for coming. Happy to have you here today. Okay, so let's get to the topic of today. Trust me, this is one topic that we all need to hear. We all need to hear it. Just this morning, we were just talking about in the Money Click. For those of us who are in the Money Click program, this morning was all about creating that awareness in us that real estate investing is not for trophy. It's for the sake of cash flow. It's an investment. And if we're going to do it the right way, then there are certain things we need to get out of our minds. And one of those things is that idea of I must first go and show my village people that I've made it. All right? Because there's a lot of people that have shown their village people that they've made it, built a mansion in the village, but they are struggling where they are. In fact, some people, after building the mansion, they find it difficult to get themselves again. All right. So we want to look at some of the things that lead to this. And one of those things, and one of those things are things like at this trauma, right? I want us to go deeper into it. Across a lot of African communities, there's this phenomenon that deserves a deeper conversation. And what is that? A man may be living in a rented apartment somewhere in a particular city, right? He's struggling with cash flow. He has little or no investments. He has no retirement plans. He has no significant assets that produces income for him. But yet, he's spending his last hundreds of millions building a massive village, massive mansion in his village. A house that it is so large that even as large as it is, he only occupies it for a few weeks in a year. Right? Sometimes the house is even bigger than his financial capacity. Right? A house built not because it solves a housing problem. No, it is built because it solves an emotional problem. And that's one thing that a lot of us have failed to see. It's not solving a housing problem, it's solving an emotional problem. All right? So the question is, what are we really building? And more importantly, what are we trying to heal? See, those things we're doing is actually a response. It's a response, right? So the house is not about shelter, right? See, a home serves practical purpose. It provides safety, comfort, stability, security. But many village mansions are not primarily about shelter. No, they are often about identity. It's not about shelter, it's about identity. It's about recognition. It's about validation. It's about status. It's about belonging to that class of people that they regard in the society, in the village, in the owner. It's about respect. It's about respect. So sometimes the house is saying, now I've made it. That's the interpretation of what the house is saying. Now I've made it. Now they can see that I've made it. Right? Excuse me. The house is saying, I'm no longer poor. If you think I was poor, this is proof that I'm no longer poor. Sometimes it's saying, nobody will look down on me again. Nobody is going to look down on my family again. Sometimes that house is saying, my family suffered, but I've broken the circle. Now put some respect to that family name. Right? So that building becomes more than just concrete and blocks. It becomes an emotional evidence of success. An emotional evidence of success. And how did we get here? For most of us, we got here as a result of trauma of growing up with lack. See, many people who build beyond their means are not simply making financial decisions. They're responding to old emotional wounds. It could be that they grew up in extreme poverty. They grew up in overcrowded homes. Maybe they were mocked for being poor at some point in their lives. They watched their parents struggle, right? So those experiences leave a mark. A lot of people that go on to do these things have experiences that left a mark in them, and that mark is yet to heal. So years later, when money eventually arrives, that person is no longer just building a house. They are trying to build protection against that old pain. So that mansion becomes proof that the struggle was not in vain. It becomes proof. You know, I have years ago when I was working in Makodi, I had the driver who was working with us. He has worked for so many years, so many years. Every now and then, he's always complaining about housing where he is and all that. But guess what? He has a very big mansion. He practically spent everything he had to build that house in the village. But he's struggling financially. The moment the office brings up an offer and say, there's an offer, the bank we're using said that you can take up to so amount of loan, he's the first to apply. In fact, one day they sent out an email asking people who want to take loans so that they'll deduct from their salary. He didn't know when he replied all. And he was the first person to attempt to get loans. But he has a mansion in the village. So sometimes it's just a trauma response. I'll give you another example of a trauma response that affects a lot of us, most of us, some of us anyway, especially people who come from the southern and the southeastern parts, right? Yes, I will attribute some part of south people and some and mostly Southeast people, to this trauma. It is the trauma of the aftermath of the Biafran War. You know, most of the time, one of the things that we fail to do is a lot of times nobody wants to talk about the war. It's so bad that they've erased everything concerning it from our curriculums. So children don't learn anything about it anymore. But do you know what? We still live with the trauma of the war till today. Do you know that? We're still living from the trauma of the Biafran War. And yes, trauma is inherited. And what we do with houses and mansions in the village is evident that that trauma has been passed on from generation to generation. To be passed on from generation to generation. Right? So, you know, like today when I posted in the Money Click about you know, trying to tell people not to invest for trophy and invest for the sake of investing, build houses of trophy, but for investing. You know, somebody said, a particular tribe. And yes, that's true. That was in cohort one. And that's true. A particular tribe comes to mind, and it's the Igbos. It is when you think about houses in the village in that magnitude, the first people that come to mind are the Igbos. But do you know it was never like that from time? For you to fully understand why many Igbo families think about property the way they do today, then we must acknowledge a painful historical reality. The scars of the Nigerian Civil War. Not just that, and the aftermath of that Biafran War. Right? The aftermath of that war did not end when the war ended. So what happened? After the war, people lost homes. So a lot of Igbo families had properties in different parts of the country. Right? In Port Harcourt, in Lagos, in different parts of the country. But after the war, most of them lost those homes. People just took over their homes. They lost businesses, they lost lands, they lost investment, they lost rental properties. They lost entire livelihoods across Nigeria. So families who owned substantial assets before the war returned to find everything gone. Others lost access to properties that had spent years of their life building. A lot of people who had savings in the banks were left with very little after the implementation of that 20-pound policy. So an entire generation experienced a painful lesson. And what was that lesson? What you build outside your home can be taken away. So whether consciously or unconsciously, that experience shaped financial behavior. So for many survivors, the safest place to invest became a word, home. The safest place to invest became a word, home. Home. It became home. Right? So the village became more than just a geographical location. It became a symbol of security. A place where nobody could drive you away. A place where your roots could not be questioned. A place where your success could not be confiscated. But the challenge is that trauma often creates responses that make sense emotionally, but not always financially. So emotionally, it made sense. Don't do anything unless it's home. Don't build nothing unless it's home. All right? So going home to build was a trauma response out of fear of what experienced in the past. Building it in that magnitude is another response to poverty. So poverty, trauma, plus the trauma of past experience joined together is what is causing what you're saying today. You know, one of the things, one of the most powerful things about trauma is that it does not need to be spoken to be transferred. It doesn't. Eh? Children watch, children absorb. Eh? They absorb, they observe, they absorb. A lot of the younger generations today, a lot of us today never experienced the war. We did not. Yet, this generation today inherited some of those financial beliefs of people who experienced the war. And that's why, you know, one of the biggest mistakes that happened was, for me, was letting all those who experienced that war, especially the soldiers of that war, just reintegrate back into the society. There was no form of counseling or psychological help for them. And I wouldn't talk about the other trauma that they got to release back into their societies, because that's not the focus of this class. But there are other traumas, trust me, that came out as a result of the aftermath of the war that we don't talk about. There was no form of psychological help for those soldiers. You can't imagine the amount of fear, their horror stories, the amount of hatred, their horror stories were carried and passed on to their children whom they told us those things. My grandfather went to the war. My mom's father was in the war, so I understand. My dad's brother died in the war, so I understand. You need to become conscious for you not to be for you not to be a part of that trauma. Let's move on. There's a lot, right? So even though this younger generation was not in the war, like I said, they never experienced the war, but they inherited those financial beliefs of those people who were part of the war or who were in that era. And what was some of those beliefs? Always build something in the village. That was one of the beliefs that the war left a lot of Igbo people with. Always build something in the village. Right? Another belief that was passed on is land in your hometown is the safest environment, is the safest investment. And that came from a place of emotions, not really finances. Land in your hometown is the safest investment. Another belief is that no matter where you live, your real success must be visible at home. No matter where you live, your real success must be visible at home. So for them, till today, for a lot of people, if their success is not visible at home, if they are not, they don't see themselves as successful. Right? They don't see themselves as successful. And that's the reason, just like Madam Uzosike said, wealth is always, does he have a house? Does he have a house in the village? That's what wealth now eventually became. Does he have a house in the village? So real success must be visible at home. So for some people, whether they are successful or not, they just try to create that visibility at home. Right? Another belief that was passed on is you can lose property elsewhere, but nobody can take your father's land. So those beliefs were not created in a vacuum. Right? Those beliefs were not created in a vacuum. They were shaped by historical experiences. If you remember, when I thought about Money Blueprint and the Money Click program, one of the things I told you that shapes your blueprints, right, are past experiences. Remember, I told you that the things you heard shapes your experiences. I told you that the things you observe Modeling shapes your experiences. And lastly, I told you that the things you've experienced, past experiences, shape your blueprints. This is one of those experiences that shapes the blueprint you see today, right? So over time, survival strategies became financial philosophies, right? Became financial philosophies. Financial philosophies became family traditions. And these family traditions became unquestioned rules. Nobody questioned it. So till today, somebody makes money, the first thing he does with everything he has is to go and build the magnificent house in the village. And that became a norm. That became a norm. I've told the story here before about an old colleague who, this one, he didn't even build a house in his own village, he built it in his wife's village. But what they don't know is that he's struggling financially. But he built a wonderful house in his wife's village. And the funny thing is, which is accompanied with some other things, is that he did it during the mother-in-law's burial. Just as the burial was about to happen, he got money from God knows where and did this wonderful thing he did in the village. And after that, I'm not sure he has ever been there again. Trauma. Why? He just wanted it. He didn't want people to come and it would seem like their place is not the place is not nice. Eh? Validation. Because of validation. So family traditions became unquestioned rules. And eventually people began building not because they have carefully analyzed the numbers, but because it was successful people in the family. It's what successful people in the family has always done. So survival decisions somehow became wealth building decisions, unfortunately. Right? And the tragedy is that what helps a generation survive is not always what helps the next generation build wealth. That's something we need to understand. What helps a particular generation to survive today necessarily does not help the next generation to build wealth. So we've carried on a survival strategy and trauma of the past, and we're still using it up till today. Up till today. Up till today. There's a lot of trauma. A lot of people have carried on. There's a lot of traditions, survival means that we've carried up to that has no longer has any relevance of today. The generation that lived through war needed security. They needed roots. They needed something that nobody could take away. So that response then, as at that time, it made a lot of sense. That response of, oh, let's go back home and build, as at that time, it made absolute sense. But the truth is that today's generation is facing a different challenge. Right? So the question is just not, oh, what do I, how do I protect what I have? The question is, how do I grow wealth sustainably? And sometimes the answer is businesses, it's stocks, it's rates, like we talked about yesterday, it's commercial estates, it's rental properties, it's mutual funds, it's global investments, it's diversified assets. So the danger comes in when we inherit the fear, but not the context. We inherit the fear, but not the context. Right? Thank you so much, Madam Mozazike. Says wedding and funerals make people complete old gigantic buildings that no one will stay in after the event. Yes, and that's the truth. That's the truth. But what we fail to realize is how deeply these actions are rooted in trauma. Trauma that has been passed on from one generation to another. Right? Fear that have been passed on from one generation to another. Those fears were passed on, but without context, without the context of that time. It's just the way, it's just the way people, it's just the way people are so, what's the word? People kill themselves over having a male child, for example, in our society. See, there was a time in our society, in the time of our ancestors, that probably if you don't have a male child, you have a problem. That doesn't apply today. That does not apply today. So we're still practicing the same thing. So people say, well, yeah, there will be somebody who will bear the name, so who inherits property. People who don't even have properties to give to their children are having more children that they're supposed to have because they want to have male children. There are a lot of beliefs that we've carried on till today, and we left the context that brought about it. Somebody asked me recently that you have two girls. That means you're going to have another child now. So you try to have a male child. I said, I'm no longer having children again in my life. I'm not interested. Eh? Dangote no get male child. Why is he killing himself? But you see people doing things that are detrimental to their finances because of a belief that no longer exists in the context of today. A belief that no longer exists in the context of today. Right? So one reason village mansions are common is because villages, remember, the people who knew you when you had nothing still live there. The people who saw your parents struggle still live there. The people who knew your family story still live there. So when someone returns with success, there can be a powerful desire to show visible evidence. Sometimes it's not out of pride. Sometimes it's out of unresolved emotional need. So the thinking is, they must see what I've become. All these people that saw me when things were bad. All these people that saw me when I had nothing. All the people that saw me when I was suffering so hard. Now they need to see that things are better. So sometimes it's you filling up a need. And that's what trauma is. You're filling up a need for people to see you in a different light. They must see what I have become now. They must see that I'm in a better place. So you live your life of validation. But financial maturity asks a different question. And that question is, what do you need your money to do for you and your family on the long term? It's not about what people will see. Right? There's a difference between building for applause and building for freedom. There's nothing wrong with building a beautiful home. But the problem comes up when you are just all about appearances, when appearances replace planning, when it's all about just status, right? That's why a lot of people build homes, they build houses that impress relatives, but they fail to build assets that generate income for them. And the result is tragic. The result is absolutely, completely tragic. Absolutely tragic. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Thank you, Madam Tony George. That was in the year I wrote an article. If I remember the title of that article, I think it's the unnecessary quest for a male child. I wrote that article, I think sometime in maybe 2013 or thereabout. Why did I write it? I wrote that article because there was just digressing a bit because of this comment. There was a relative of ours that something happened that got me angry, that made me write it. A relative of ours had five children, five girls, and this man was struggling, right? This man was struggling. I think it's this was my dad's cousin's child's, something like that. That's how the relation was. The man was struggling, had five girls, and he went ahead to have another child. And in that year, they said he had a twin. When I mean struggling, you can't imagine it. He had a twin, and he now had a boy and a girl. So he now had seven children. And then I was asking myself, so now that you have a male child, how has your life changed? How has it changed? You now have seven children. You couldn't cater for five. With five, you were struggling hard. Now you have seven. And that's why that was the first time I told myself that the number of children that you have, the number of children you have is a financial decision. You remember, I told you earlier that what is advantageous to this generation might not be relevant to the next generation. In the generation of our ancestors, having a lot of children was advantageous. Yes, it was an advantage to have a lot of children in those days. If you have a lot of children, because it was hard to have hired labor. So if you had a lot of children, if you check most of the wealthy people as at that time were people who had a lot of children. So the children at some point were the ones who were working at the farm and things like that. So as at that time, it was relevant. So in some of them in those times, that's why they even wanted the males, because they needed them to work more. But it is no longer relevant in our time. Are you still taking your children to farm? So I looked at this, my cousin. You can still look out for that. Just go on Google and type the necessary request for a male child. Right? And um, you would get more from that article. Right. Yes, thank you so much, Madam Anne, for yes. That the quest for it. Yes, the quest for it. Right. So back to building for applause and not for freedom. So a lot of people build houses that impress relatives, but fail to build assets that generate income for them. And the result is tragic. So they own a magnificent house, they own a large compound, but yet they are struggling. Remember, they own it in the village, but yet they're struggling with school fees. They're struggling with medical expenses. They're struggling with retirement planning. They have no retirement plan. Some people, their whole retirement, every money they have gone into that house in the village. By the time they retire, to eat becomes a problem. They have no business capital. They have no investment opportunities. The house looks wealthy, but the finances are fragile. And all these things are rooted in trauma. Financial trauma is often seeking visibility. See, one lesson from financial trauma is this, right? Is that healing is you seeking for peace. Healing seeks peace, but trauma seeks proof. Trauma is always seeking proof, right? So a healed person is always asking what creates long-term security. A traumatized person is mostly asking, what will make people know I have succeeded? What will people say? If you're always thinking, what will people say? There's trauma somewhere. There's trauma somewhere. For some people, it's not even about just lottery. For some people, they say it's about legacy. About legacy. That's what they are doing it for. Legacy. They want their family name to be remembered, their success to be recognized, their achievements visible, right? But the deeper question is a building the strongest legacy you can leave? Is a building really the strongest legacy you can leave? Would the children benefit from it, or would they rather benefit from investment portfolios, businesses, income producing assets? So that's why when your children inherit that house in the village, are they going to be inheriting just a house? Or would it be a source or a means to financial freedom for them? Now, let's look at what wealthy families, let's look at what wealthy families do instead. What do they do? A lot of families that have created wealth, what they focus on when they are investing in properties is first, they focus on income producing assets first. It's not that wealthy families don't build mansions in the village, oh, but that was never their first move. See, the mansions came after they have settled their finances. The mansions came after they've become wealthy. And what is wealth? Wealth is that you have enough income producing assets to cater for all your expenses. You don't need to work for you to live a good life. So they focused on income producing assets first. Businesses, rental properties, stocks, rates, farms, assets that generate cash flow. Cash flow that eventually now started funding their lifestyle. Cash flow that eventually funded their lifestyle, keep funding their lifestyle. Right? And then notice something interesting, like I said. Right? So a lot of truly wealthy families build homes after they have established a strong asset base. See, they've stabilized themselves. They can never be poor again. That's when they go on to build those kind of mansions. So the houses, those kind of houses become a result of wealth for them. It's a result of wealth, not the evidence of wealth. They're not trying to use it to show you that they have become. No, they can build those kind of houses over and over and over again, and they can never be poor. Why? Because they have attained financial freedom. A lot across Africa, it's not just a Nigerian thing or an Igbo thing anymore. Across Africa today, a lot of people spend their highest earnings building houses that produce no income. They spend their highest earnings building houses that produce no income. And as they are building that house, they are postponing investing, they are postponing retirement planning, they are postponing business ownership, they're postponing everything that will bring cash flow back to them. And it's so painful. It's painful that somebody will spend 100 million more, 200 million, building a mansion that he's going to use only 2 weeks in a year. Yet, that person may never invest that same money into any form of asset that is capable of producing income for him or for generations. It's not a money problem. The money was there. The problem is not money. It's often trauma. It's trauma. It's a trauma problem. It's an inherited trauma. And for a lot of Igbo families, especially, part of that trauma has historical roots. Historical roots that deserve great understanding. Historical roots that deserve compassion, not judgment too. But we need to understand it and begin to change it. So what are we really trying to heal? Right? Sometimes that mansion is an attempt to heal something that is broken in us. Sometimes that mansion is an attempt to heal childhood shame, family poverty, social rejection, hmm? Social rejection, historical displacements, fear of losing everything again, those feelings of inadequacy, that fear of being forgotten, and most especially, the need for validation. So the challenge is that money can buy buildings, but it cannot fully heal emotional wounds. Only awareness can do that for you. Only healing can do that. Only understanding the root issue can do that. Because no house is ever large enough to satisfy a wound that has remained unaddressed. And trust me, there's a wound that strongly has remained unaddressed for us in our society. There's a wound that is staring us all in the face. Jesus asked a powerful question in Mark chapter 8, verse 36. He asked that, what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? Financially, we might also ask ourselves, what shall it profit a person if they build the biggest house in the village but neglect the financial future of their family? See, the Bible repeatedly kept emphasizing wisdom over appearance. Wisdom, wisdom. Proverbs 24, 3 to 4. By wisdom, a house is built, and through understanding, it is established. Notice, not by money alone, not by size, by wisdom. By wisdom. So we need to start asking ourselves some very hard questions. So before building that dream mansion, ask yourself, am I building from wisdom or from woundedness, from my old wounds? Ask yourself, am I solving a housing need or am I solving an emotional need? Am I creating wealth or am I just displaying wealth? There's a difference. Will this asset strengthen my family's future? Will it? Ask yourself, this money, what else could this money accomplish for me? This money I want to go and bury in a mansion in the village. What else could this money accomplish for me? These are not anti-house questions. They are wisdom questions. Right? So there's nothing wrong with owning a beautiful home in your village. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. The issue is not the house. The issue is the motive. Right? The issue is the motive. Because sometimes what looks like a real decision, what looks like a proper decision is actually just an emotional decision. And when those financial decisions are driven by unresolved trauma, they often become expensive attempts at healing. Very, very expensive. See, the generation that survived war and loss taught us resilience. And for that, we should all be grateful. They taught us a lot of resilience. That generation taught us a lot of resilience that survived the war. But wisdom requires us to ask whether some of the financial behaviors we inherited were designed for survival rather than wealth creation. Their actions was for survival. And it will be unfortunate if you're still thinking of survival instead of wealth creations. Right? And yes, thank you, Madam Ebele. Maintaining those village houses are expensive. It's expensive maintaining those buildings. So a lot of us are trapped in a survival mindset. We are trapped in a survival mindset. So our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents may have needed the visible symbol a visible symbol that nobody could take from them again because of their experience. Our challenge today is different. It's different, right? Today, we must build not only houses that stand, we must build assets that produce. Eh? It's not just only compounds that impress people. We need portfolios that can sustain us. Not just buildings that people will admire. We need systems that will create future freedom for our future generations. I'm not saying do not build mansions in your village, but build them after you've attained wealth. So you've gotten to that point where you no longer need to work to make money anymore. Then you know that you can build that mansion and you can build it 10 times again. Why? Because you've attained wealth. You become financially free. And most importantly, you are at that point where you've created future for your future generations. Remember, always remember that true wealth is not measured by the size of the mansion that people can see. It's not about that. It is measured by the strength of the financial foundation. It is measured by the strength of the assets, the strength of the opportunities, the strength of the legacy that remain long, 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 long after the applause is gone. And remember, there's a course coming up. And that course is the healing from financial trauma course. Right? The healing from financial trauma course is coming up. It's coming up in the first week of August. Currently, the early bird is currently on. The early bird is currently on. So I urge you to be a part of it. I urge you to be a part of it. Right? Be a part of the healing from financial trauma. See, a lot of things, a lot of actions we take are trauma responses. You just do not understand it yet. You just don't understand it yet. And that's the reason why this course is a must for everybody. Trust me. It is a must for everybody. It's a must for everybody. All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Yes, for the course, billionaires pay an early bird fee of 13.5, outsiders pay 17.5. So this flyer is for outsiders. Billionaires, the flyer for you is right in the Money Click groups. Yes, thank you so much, Madam Abele, for sharing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we've come to the end of today's session on this wonderful Thursday afternoon. So remember, for those who also everybody, in fact, the Fathers Conference is coming up by TIP this Saturday, and I'm going to be speaking at the Fathers Conference, and it's going to be a wonderful time. Trust me. Please don't miss the Fathers Conference this weekend on Saturday, right? At the Intentional Parents Academy. Please do not miss it. We want to see everyone there. Drag your husbands to come, please. And yes, for the men who are in the body click, please do well to also be there. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Yes, again, money click to the world. And we're also reminding you also that if you are yet to book your spot in the 2027 Money Click program, the time is now, right? The time is now. Get on board the 2027 Money Click program. Even if you're part of the 2026 Money Click program, get yourself into the 2027 Money Click program. People have already started sitting in the 2027 Money Click program. They're already sitting, right? And waiting. Okay. So you can book a slot for just 10,000 for a single slot, a couple slot for 20,000 naira. And the details are on your screen. If you want to reach out to us, reach out to any of the numbers on your screen, and we'll be happy to get you started. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of today's live session. Thank you. Oh yes, Madam Aziz Draga husband. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Oh, Madam Tony John is cracking me up. Madam Tony John says, join us before you go blow. Oh my God. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, everyone that have joined us today. Um, thank you so much, everybody. It's been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Thursday afternoon today. Remember, we're always here Wednesdays and Thursdays every single week, right? Hope to see you again next week, Wednesday at exactly 12 noon Nigerian time. My name is Chukwemeka Oyinezi, and I am your billionaire coach. See you again. Bye bye.